Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wake Up Report. Alfonso Sylvester and Mario Wooford were arrested Saturday and appeared in criminal court in Chicago. Both men were charged with possession of heroin with the intent to deliver and aggravated fleeing and eluding of police. Both are felonies, according to the prosecution. The two gentlemen are mainly accused of distributing heroin, and that particular batch of heroin was responsible for 74 overdoses in 72 hours last week. And what is that? That's about was that an OD hour almost, I guess. So the Chicago police and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration combined forces to get out in the streets and find out where the source of the drugs was coming from, and apparently it led to these two gentlemen. Both men are gang members. Both men have prior convictions. Both men have prior felony convictions and felony charges. However, Mr. Sylvester, while appearing in court, was given a bond of $30,000, and Mr. Wooford was given a bond of $10,000 by their respective judges. And unless the procedure differs from state to state, I believe when you're given a bond, you only have to come up with 10% of it. So at $30,000, Mr. Sylvester only has to come up with $3,000. Mr. Wooford only has to come up with $1,000. I believe that's 10% of that $10,000. The police on Saturday spotted Mr. Sylvester walking out on the streets after, I guess, they lost him in a chase or something like that. They arrested him and found him with $1,000 in cash in his pocket. Sylvester did admit to selling the drugs to the undercover officers, which means basically, what is that, at a $30,000 bond, you only have to come up with 10%, which is $3,000. Mr. Sylvester had $1,000 on him, which meant he, roughly had 1/3 of his bail in cash in his pocket, which goes without saying. It's not going to be difficult to come up with the other $2,000. Mr. Sylvester, who was a graduate of Eastern Illinois University, and so this wasn't no stupid guy, he was a high school graduate. He went to college and was being supervised for a prior DUI. According to prosecutors, he had also been convicted of 3 prior felonies, including a 2011 conviction for resisting arrest. And, I guess his bail was knocked up a little bit higher. But again, $30,000, and I've got 1/3 of that in my pocket. And I know I'm going to be out. My behind is not going to warm up any jail cell bench anytime soon. Now, if you could tally up the amount of police work that went into finding these two gentlemen between the Chicago Police Department and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, if you could possibly total up the manpower hours, the surveillance hours, the hours that were put in the combing the streets, the hours that were put into the fire department answering all of these overdose calls and getting to these people. If you take into account the fact that typically when you, at least to my knowledge, when you overdose on a drug, that means you die. I get, I'm not a dope head, so I don't know. That's what it typically means. When you OD on something, that means you take so much of it. You are either dead, you're dead, you're on your way to dying, or ain't no or. You're either on your way, you're dead, or you're on your way to dying. So the fire department, the police department, the drug enforcement agency, manpower hours, combing the streets, investigating, undercover buys, running down criminals. The criminals escape. The same enforcement agencies and police departments now have to comb the streets to find these two individuals. You find both individuals. You arrest both individuals. One of them admits to selling the tainted drugs. They appear in court. One judge sets a bond at $30,000. The other one sets one at $10,000. Both men are going to make their bond or their minimum deposit, and they are scheduled, at least one of them is scheduled to appear, Mr. Sylvester is scheduled to appear in court on October the 21st. Now, I don't condone criminal behavior. I don't condone selling drugs. And for those of you who listen to the show, you know how I am about black men destroying their communities with drugs and violence and gang activity. However, what these two gentlemen need to do is before October 21st, they need to take all of the money in the drug business, their respective drug trades. They need to buy a couple of tickets out of the United States. They need to fly to a country that has no extradition, and they need to live the rest of their lives out wherever it is that they wind up, because it's not their fault. Anytime that you have a system that is as stupid, ridiculous, and asinine as the system that is currently going on in Chicago, then the criminals at some point are not at fault. I can understand now why black men all over the south side of Chicago can gun each other down and gun down innocent people and just gun down anything in their way, because apparently the legal system in Chicago is so asinine, so stupid, and so ridiculous as to let two convicted heroin dealers who have dealt out heroin that is so tainted it has resulted in 74 overdoses in less than 72 hours. You catch the men after a chase, after they admit to selling the drugs, after an undercover sting, and two moronic judges don't have enough common sense to take two gang members who have sold dope, eluded the police, sold to the police, are responsible for all these ODs. One of them has prior felonies. You just let them out because you don't demonstrate a history of violent behavior, so I'll just let you out. The other one, though, prior convictions, prior felonies. I'll tell you what, we'll just kick yours up to $30,000. That'll teach you a lesson. If it were me, do you think that I would stick around to appear in court for you to tell me what you already know to be true? It's not just Chicago. You hear about these moronic judicial decisions made every day, and this is why it pays to be a criminal. The motivation to do wrong and not be punished for doing wrong is right there. And, I don't understand, for whatever reason, if these guys are guilty, and they are guilty, why don't we send people like this? Why don't you say, look, you sell drugs like this, heroin, it's heroin. You sell heroin and you get caught and convicted for selling heroin, you ain't going to jail. You're not going to sit up in jail to get out on good behavior so you can go right back out on the street and sell heroin. You're going to go to the United States military for 20 years. You are going to provide some kind of service to this country, some kind of productive service. You are not going to sit up in jail with flat screen TVs and all the drugs you can get in jail, all of the whatever it is that you can get, because it's, for jail, for jail and black men, it's like paradise found. Where's the punishment at? If you're in a gang and that gang member participates in behavior that is detrimental to the area that they are in, meaning that drive-by shootings, random killings, drug possession, drug dealing, drug selling, intimidation, fear tactics, basically terrorism. If you are part of a gang that engages in that kind of activity, you will go to the United States military for 20 years, and we will find something for you to do. Or here's one. I can do you one better. All that manpower, you tally up all that manpower, all that police, drug agency, fire department, combing the streets, running people down, high-speed chases, crashing cars into public property, finding these guys. Tally up that bill and charge the criminals with that bill. You ran up almost let's say $250,000 worth of manpower hours and property damage. You are going to pay that, not just in the city of Chicago, everywhere the system engages criminal behavior like this. Charge the criminal with those taxpayer dollars. Charge the criminal with those manpower hours. And you'll see how quickly the crime rate sinks in certain cases somewhere. Because if you don't pay that money back, we'll take it out of your behind when we do send you to the Army, and we'll take it out of that 20 or so years that you spend in the Army. Where do you get your judicial and law degrees from in Chicago? Out of Cracker Jack boxes or bubblegum machines or something. It gets to a point where you cannot blame criminals when the law repeatedly lets them go for the crimes that they commit. I hope Mr. Sylvester and I hope Mr. Wooford get that plane ticket so the Drug Enforcement Agency and the city of Chicago or the Chicago Police Department can now spend more money to launch a manhunt for these two. So you'll spend more taxpayer dollars to fly all over the world looking for these two. So if you do catch them, let's say they leave the country, they get caught, you're going to fly them all the way back. Then you're going to charge them with fleeing the country. Then you're going to charge them with skipping out on their bonds or skipping out on their hearings. And then you're going to, all of this when you simply could have taken two drug dealers who dealt dangerous drugs that resulted in people ODing and possibly dying. You could have charged them with attempted murder. As a matter of fact, if you OD'd and you did not die, couldn't you have charged them with attempted murder? And you say that there's no history of violence in your background, but you are in a gang. There's no history of violence in your background, but you do have multiple felonies, and you did resist arrest and whatever else it is that you charged with. So apparently, Mr. Sylvester's college education, at least, let him know how dumb the city of Chicago is and how dumb the city of Chicago's system is. Send them a postcard from wherever you are, and maybe they'll get their acts together in the future. This is KTM in the Wake Up Report saying, think a little bit. It will do wonders for you.